stop? Like, where do you draw boundaries and what does that acceptance look like?
Well, and the educator Bobby would say, absolutely not. That's never an excuse to let someone be hateful or to be judgmental and not call them on it because they're just that way. I mean, I think you have to help a person who is just that way to find their way away from that. And sometimes it's a lifelong journey. I mean, we all know that we have people in our lives that you use that term for, they're just that way. They're never going to change, but you don't stop trying.
Yeah, because this is about, you can't change them.
Yeah.
So why do we try, right? I know acceptance, you want to accept people, but for me, it's like if a biblical imperative is being compromised, and I think the conversation you're talking about speaks to this, when you have to set a boundary and say, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this, right? Because this is, I can't stand before God and do this.
Hi, welcome to Jesus Loves Joe. I'm Donna. I'm the executive pastor of Weekday Ministries.
I'm Bobby Steiner. I'm the executive director of Weekday Ministries.
I'm Hope Bennett. I'm the director of operations of Weekday Ministries.
Hey folks, I'm Jerry Bennett, pastor, Seven Creeks Church.
Today, we're going to talk about you can't change them and what that looks like. So you can only imagine how often in our lives do we try to change each other? And Paul talks about in Romans, we're going to look at, it's a short verse. It's Romans 15, and it is verse 7. And it says, therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. And that passage in conclusion is talking about the strong and the weak and to accept one another. And if you look at the previous chapters beforehand, they're talking about not to judge one another and don't cause each other to stumble. And so I thought this was important because if I'm being honest, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I accept you for who you are. No, I don't. Not a lot. I'm guilty of that. I'm convicted because I don't always accept people for who they are. And I can be very critical, myself as well, like on myself. But I just want to dive into this acceptance and what does that look like in the body of Christ? So
much to unpack here.
I know.
I mean, I just think about division among just humans in general and how we divide ourselves. And, you try and change somebody's mind about something politically. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole. And you're right, they're wrong, or whatever party they identify with is wrong, or the person they chose to vote for is wrong. And I think about it and I think, when you have discourse with people and you sit down and actually have a conversation with them, ultimately, we probably all want about the same thing. We just disagree how we're going to get there. And so by doing that, by, like you said, having judgment on other people and trying to change them without, by insisting that you're right and they need to capitulate to your line of thinking, we do nothing but further divide people. And you're right, you're not going to change them, but boy, you can sure learn who people are and have good conversations with people and be a good listener. And all of a sudden, you can remain friends. I have had so many people that are like, yeah, I'm no longer friends with them because they don't believe what we believe. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, right. Wow. Like, I have really made it a point to not, on social medias, put anything out there that is charged politically or charged even religiously to the point, that people want to challenge me on it. Now, am I willing to have conversations? And if somebody does challenge me on something like that, I send them a personal message and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about this, but not over social media and not over text. I want to have a real conversation with you because you need to know my heart and I want to know yours. Because I think we get stuck in, we don't really know what people are thinking. Mm-hmm. We just assume often that they have malintent or that they're wrong.
I like that you said, I want to know your heart. I think there's something to that in accepting one another and truly accepting, because scripture talks about, Jerry, maybe you can quote this because I didn't.
Well, yeah, you got thrown on the spot for quoting scripture now.
Well,
Oh, maybe you got it. He knows a punt
Let's
of
see what
barb
it
now.
is.
well, no,
Yeah,
I,
Bobby's
the
got
Lord,
it.
examine your heart and
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which one?
That's
Yeah.
really what it's about.
That's in
Is-
Psalm 139.
Mhm.
See?
Yeah.
See, I
Search
knew
and
somebody'd
examine
have
your own
it.
heart. Yeah,
Test me and know my.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I think that we don't always get to know each other's heart unless we allow one another to, and
Right.
that's important.
So often people just make assumptions about other people and their beliefs and don't ever take the time to be the listener. They're just the responder.
Thoughts?
Well, I kind of relate to what you said about no judgment. So what we're doing in those circumstances is we're casting judgment. We're making a judgment that's because someone thinks something different than us, and we're casting judgment on there. And so I think we don't have a clear perspective, right? We don't know where that person is coming from. We assume where that person is coming from, when if you actually have a conversation, you could have a really good conversation. And at the end of the day, acceptance is about respecting one another, and we are called to respect one another, right? We're all to submit to one another, right? We're not to judge each other. So if we fall under those things that Jesus said were his imperatives, right, his commands, then we will accept one another. It's a natural outcome when we're kind of doing it his way, when our mindset is thinking like Christ.
Yeah, in this 14, 15, those chapters in Romans, there's this Jew and Gentile thing going on, strong and weak. And what they're really getting at is, I mean, they were arguing about what you can and can't do. You can't do this. Well, you can't do this because you're Jewish. You can't do this because you're a Gentile. You're not allowed to do this because you're a Gentile. And it's just like, well, like, what's the sole purpose? It's Jesus. Walking through this personally in the last couple of months with some friends, close friends, we don't agree on some things, but that does not change the love that we have for one another, and how you can still be the church, the big C, right? And care for one another, respect one another, and serve one another. And all those things still take place, even if you don't agree on a thing. And I just saw that was modeled for me in them. And I was able to model it back. And, you know, a healthy relationship still exists. But it wouldn't have happened if it just existed over text or social media, keyboard bullying, whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called.
Or if people weren't really willing to say what was going on.
That's a good
A
point too.
conversation. Yeah,
You
some
know,
people just aren't willing to have the conversation.
because then you know what happens. Since we're not willing to have a conversation, you know what I'm left at? Assumption.
Say we're making assumptions about what
And
people
you know
believe.
what that starts with, folks. I end up making something out of myself because assumptions are only mine with zero input from the other party, and I can't change them. I have to meet with them and sit down and say, hey, tell me about your heart. What's going on there?
Yeah. I mean, and when we make assumptions, I'm normally totally opposite of what is really the truth in that situation when I assume things.
Well, there's so much other information that we don't have
Yeah.
in the moment. So we take it on face value when there's, remember, there's this iceberg of stuff underneath the surface that people are walking through, right? And their filters and their perspective and what's going on with them. So it's really hard to accept one another when we make assumptions.
Well, and you hear people having these heated conversations or watch them write their heated conversations. It's more like it, because most people that get in conversations don't get heated unless it's really passionate stuff. But the keyboard warriors get out there, and it quickly degenerates into name calling, and it's not anything about the original topic, because nobody's talking about that. We're just trying to cut each other at the knees and be the better one with, have the better comeback to someone else. And I think about little kids that do that when
I know you are, but what am I?
yeah,
Well, we want to be right over loving.
right.
Oh, that
You are
pride.
exactly correct.
There's a pride thing, but
It is. And if
more
you can
important to be
put that
right.
aside, as parents, you do that with your kids when, they're arguing and they're, tearing each other apart, and he's doing this and no, but he said this. And if you can get down to the root of it, it's typically either somebody doesn't have all the information or they're misinterpreting the information that they do have and making it, like you said, judgment or assumptions. And so many times I see people doing that, and I type it all out and I get myself ready to be involved in that, and I hit backspace that. That is not my circus. I don't need to be involved in that because it's not productive. And I just worry about people that just get themselves so worked up and their blood pressure's up and they're angry and thinking, well, why? Why are you so angry? Do you even know do you even know this person personally? No. So why are you mad? You don't even know them. They don't even know you're mad. They are living rent free in your head right now. And why would you do that to yourself?
Well, so we have this point of acceptance, but at what point do you set boundaries? Or so I want to give this example. I'll pick on Bobby today.
Uh-oh, I'm getting picked on.
So if Bobby yells and is just disrespectful to others constantly in the way that she communicates, do we say, is it okay to be like in that for that example, that's just Bobby. We have to accept her. But what if it's actually damaging or harming us or hurting us and she doesn't stop? Like, where do you draw boundaries, and what does that acceptance look like?
Well, and the Bobby, the educator Bobby would say, absolutely not. That's never an excuse to let someone be hateful or to be judgmental and not call them on it because they're just that way. I mean, I think you have to help a person who is just that way to find their way away from that. And sometimes it's a lifelong journey. I mean, we all know that we have people in our lives that you use that term for, they're just that way. They're never going to change, but you don't stop trying.
Yeah, because this is about you can't change them.
Yeah.
So why do we try? Right? I know acceptance, you want to accept people, but for me it's like if a biblical imperative is being compromised, and I think the conversation you're talking about speaks to this, when you have to set a boundary and say, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree on this. Right? Because this is I can't stand before God and do this.
Well, and you can come to a stalemate on those kinds of conversations. Go, hey man, you've given me a lot to think about in what you had to say. I still believe what I believe, but you've given me a lot to think about, and honor that person thinks differently than you or has different viewpoints than you. But when you're right, when you come to values and things that biblically you value, it's very difficult to go, okay, I see your point. Well, I don't. Sometimes I just don't. And you just have to say, you've given me a lot to think about. And I'll consider that.
So, Bobby the screamer, yelling at everybody happens all the time.
That's me.
That's why we're in this room. She's got us
I
locked in
said,
here.
come on, get in here.
So you can't change the fact that somebody may be, there's the iceberg thing there, right? There's a reason probably that this person is, and it's not her, by the way, just to throw that out there. But if somebody does have this thing that doesn't create unity, and because acceptance creates unity and accepting people right where they're at. And if you can't change them, because you can't, what's it look like to walk alongside them, coach them, and first and foremost, pray for them. And that, if they have a relationship with Jesus and you know that to be true, there is accountability in that. And when you can say, hey, you got time to take a walk, it's like, what's going on? Especially if you have a relationship with folks, and to get to the point where you can ask somebody bluntly, like, hey, what is going on? That means there's a deeper relationship that you've built with them. And Jesus did that. And if we look at his example, he walked with people, physically walked with them. Mm-hmm. And that's important, because then now you have permission to go into that person's life and say, hey, what's going on? What's underneath the iceberg? That's drawing that up. And get ready, because they may unpack that sucker on you. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because remember, you can't change them, but you could be a catalyst towards change that allows for them to unload, drop off that baggage, and allow the Lord to get in there and start healing something. Or maybe they're just really loud. I don't know. And it just seems like they're yelling.
So then you take a long walk off a short pier. Yeah. Oh,
there it is. There it is.
No, I'm just kidding. Okay. I was thinking.
Okay. I know. I always scoot to the right a little. Take a walk off a short pier.
That's a saying. Maybe I've been fed all this stuff.
It is a saying. We're going to chat with Donna after this, folks, and just kind of, we're going to check in on her heart and see where she's at.
No, I mean...
No words.
I love it. Okay.
The awkward pause.
But we can't change you.
I know. See, you can't.
But listen, that was a good point. It's like, maybe they can't hear. Now, I get you're talking about the physical aspect of it. Like, maybe I can't hear. That could be a thing.
I get really loud.
Yes. And then it's like, then all of a sudden it turned into, what did I do? Why am I in trouble?
Right.
It's like, well, no, you can't hear. Like, correct. But oftentimes we're deaf to our own thing.
Yeah.
Right. And we've got blinders on, but the other people around us, we're called to accept. If I'm the loud talker or yeller, accepting me doesn't mean you're accepting my behavior.
Yeah. Good point.
Right. And the behavior is what you're countering with the person, and say, hey, you're super cool. I love you to death. And, but you yell a lot. What's going on?
But what if that continues? And at what point is it become, there's a fine line, like acceptance and judgment. Well, if you're not accepting that person because, at what point, I guess owning maybe their own.
So they don't want to own it is what you're kind of saying. And it's just, they don't have a desire to change. Is that kind of the question?
I don't know. Like, I just know in us being friends, there's, small town, we're just like, I find myself being like, oh, he's just that way. Or I just know that about him or her.
So does that allow you to give him grace?
Right.
If it does, then I think that's acceptance. Mm-hmm. If it makes you think negatively or
there's judgment
or be critical, then that's not acceptance.
But another example. Oh, there's Jerry. And he's not, by the way. He's so greedy. Oh, he's just that way. Do we accept people for the things that, regardless if they're not the greatest or what God calls us to?
Well, I think
you know what I'm saying? Like the characteristics.
Knowing that about a person or an organization or something like that is one thing. But engaging with it is different. So you can accept, this family does this a certain way. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can accept that. It may not be the way I want to do it or the way I think it should be done, but I can accept that. And I can show them grace because that's what they believe. Right. And do I need to change them? Maybe, maybe not. Mm-hmm. It may not be something that I'm called to do that with. But you're right. Particularly when you get to know people like, oh, yeah, he's just that way. Oh, he's a loud talker or, that kind of thing. Those kinds of, that's just acceptance. But if it's, I feel like if it's I could even talk today, biblical or something that is in our value world that we go, hey, no, I can't accept that. to be okay. I think you do have to challenge people on those things. And of course you're not going to be the yeller or the loud talker. You want to be the one that walks beside somebody. Help me understand. I mean, those words can diffuse a lot of I'm going to tell you how I feel. Hey, help me understand why you think this or why you choose to do this or believe this. And many times I have a greater understanding and acceptance of why that person chooses to be that way. May not change them, but I feel better about the conversations, and I feel like we maintain a better relationship when we do that, when we provide that opportunity for people.
Yeah, and I would say sometimes we don't know what God's working on in someone's life, right? And so maybe we've grown in a particular area, and they've not grown in that area, or they've grown in a different area, or their convictions are a little bit different, but we're on the same path. We're in just different places. So nitpicking each other is never going to get anybody anywhere. So I do think it's important to focus on people's strengths instead of their weaknesses. And a sin issue, if it's a repetitive sin issue, then it talks about restore each other, but do that with gentleness. And it says, and be careful lest you basically sin with them.
Right.
So we do have to be careful when we go to a brother and sister, but truly, I think we can feel like a sin is against us when it's actually not.
None of it is.
Right. And so what is the responsibility? I think that's just a prayer call, a prayer like, God, if you want me to be the one to say something, open that door, Lord. But if you don't want me, keep my mouth closed, right? So I think we have to discern, because otherwise we'd walk around with this radar, right? As
looking for
the
things.
Logs, our log is whacking everybody in the face while we're trying to get, the splinters out.
You said 2x4.
It's because there's a 2x4 lodged in my eye. I wasn't going to use it against anyone, Doug.
Well, it's accidental.
Accidental because I hit him by accidental.
Because you
gotcha.
can whack them.
Yeah. No.
I just think it's really hard to, because there are people are different.
They are.
We're not all the same.
Well, the last point I want to touch on into this, I just think of this sphere of acceptance. It can go all these different ways, but it's kind of leaning on control. But so I wrote down, if we are to accept one another, then we have to know that trying to change them is not our place. So do you have an example of a time in your life when you try to change someone, and how did that work out for that relationship? Or, I think I'll just go first. I'm going to repent and confess, but I have a very controlling, I can have a controlling nature, and I want to be in control of things, and I can get on my way or the highway. But then that's more for people like my family, not, I think I am more of a people pleaser outside of, but I don't know. And I think that I've had to learn that while sometimes I don't want certain people to be this way, but I've just come through lots of years of work that I have to accept that I can't control at a certain point, their behavior. I just can't. So
I have an example. It may not be necessarily a biblical example, but when I was young and married, I really wanted my husband to be a romantic dude. I was like, the whole Hallmark. Bring those flowers home and do all that. And for those who knew my husband, that was not him at all. That is not his love language. And I didn't even know anything about love languages then. But his love language was acts of service. And he showed me that he loved me in so many ways that I missed early on in those early years. And it did cause us problems, because I was like, well, he just doesn't really love me. because he doesn't do these things. And when I had the courage, or he had the courage to ask me, what is going on? It was like, well, I don't think you really love me because you don't do these things. He's like, okay, so would that convince you that I loved you if I brought you flowers? And and I'm like, well, maybe not now. That
Now, because I already said it.
Because when
It's
you're
a
young,
trap.
it is. But my sister was an amazing person, and she passed away. But before she passed away, when I was young and going through this, she sat me down. She goes, "Do you realize how much your husband loves you?" And we were out to lunch one day, and I said, "Well, why do you think that?" I'm 23, 24 years old, and she's like, "Listen, he would crawl to the end of the earth on hot glass if it was necessary. Like he would do that for you. He protects you. The way he shows his love, he jokes around with you when he's playing with you and engaging with you. Think fourth grade boy pulling the ponytail.
Oh, yeah.
That he very much was in that realm of how he showed his love. And once I started to see it, I was like, wow, that blew me away, because it was written all over the place. I just wasn't seeing it. And once I learned his love language, every time, like every Monday, he would drive me to work and drop the kids off once we had our boys, and he would go wash my Suburban and fill it up with gas. And at the time we had a housekeeper, he would take care of her and get her groceries and to take with her, and taking care of all these people and showing his love in so many ways, and pick us up at work and be like, hey, let's eat out on Mondays because the house is clean, and let's keep it that way, and let's spend time as a family. And when I realized, like, wow, that is just God's obedience to serving your family, and the love, and the boys were so connected. When he was home, and not deployed, it was really cool to be able to spend that time. He valued the family time. And it was so cool to really be able to see love. And up to the very end, he showed that in the very same ways, even when he didn't have the ability to do the doing of the things. He had people that were helping him out, that were his helpers, that did those things to show me that he loved me. And, I just encourage people, like, don't try and change people. When you get married, women always want to change their husbands to be the thing. This whole conversation is to say, you don't need to change them. They are the people they are, and that's the person you picked and you loved. And guys are like, please don't change at all when they meet their woman. They're like, please don't change. Don't change your hairstyle. Wear the exact same clothes that you wore when I met you.
Truth.
It's truth. I speak it. But ladies out there, don't try and change your man, because he's the guy God sent you, and it's the right dude.
Mine is. She laid out husband. That's definitely on my list of people I've tried to change and realized you cannot do that.
Cannot happen. Sorry.
So
does happen.
I would say children, or like even a sibling.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a sibling that you were like, there's something wrong with you
Yeah.
with the way you think?
Hey, my siblings watch this podcast. We're not going down that road.
She's not saying anything. No. I have siblings too. So anyways, I was just thinking, we even try parents, those kinds of things, siblings. We definitely think when we communicate that we don't accept something that they believe, something that they do, we are communicating that lack of acceptance, right? So I do think that one of the things we can do, one of the things that God allows us is prayer. And he also allows us to have influence, right? And so I always go back to, what am I modeling, right? What am I doing that may be causing a problem here? Or what am I doing that is like what I'm saying I don't like? And what am I doing that can help model that love and grace, or whatever it is? We're not.
So that's a great point. And I like what you were doing with when it comes to the kid part, because that is a thing. And for me, I think control is, again, the opposite of acceptance. And you can't change folks as much as I want to change other folks. I see something and I want to say, hey, why don't you've ever heard that phrase, don't should on someone?
Mhm.
We've heard that, right?
No.
Careful how you say that. But what we're doing is we're trying to control their actions and control what they do. Now, I will say, a great leader, a good leader, great's a big word. He would say that. I shouldn't call him a great leader, but Colonel Kasner, he said years ago, he goes, there's a circle, right? Some of y'all may know the circle. It's the circle you can control and influence. There are some things you can control. So I said some things, not some ones or people.
People
some
aren't in there.
Things that you can't control. And then there's things you can influence. And you brought up the word influence. And that's important because Jesus influenced a lot along his journey as he was walking. He was God in the flesh, but he was influencing people because of his acceptance, because of his humility and his love for folks. And he was all about giving God the glory. His influence is what we can do, and we can share his love, and that influence, folks. And maybe, just maybe, husbands get better at being husbands in some ways, and wives get better at being better at wives. Because it's like same team, bro.
Yeah.
How can we influence instead of control, influence in a Christ-like way? See what happens then.
Well, if I could drop the mic, we
Yeah,
would. That was good.
Mic drop.
Okay.
Any other thoughts? Because I don't want to. Okay.
No.
Well, we thank you for tuning in to You Can't Change Them, and you can't change us. No, I'm just
Right.
But one thought is when you try to change someone, think about this too, and don't honor that acceptance within them. You're not valuing them. It's just something to think about as you go on with your week, and you want so badly to just change just that person in general. What would Christ do with that, or the influence that Jerry was talking about? So until next time, subscribe, share with a friend, share with somebody, and we thank you for tuning in.